mind. We unwind what they're really saying, genetically modify what you're tasting. Don't need that cottage promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics, keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are mourn, just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome to your June 23rd. Is it already the 23rd of June? My God, it's crazy. Time is flying by. Welcome to your June 23rd episode of Rogue Ways. Of course, things have to change all the time, right? Right now, I can see Jeff Green in the chat. What's up, Jeff? But it says no one's watching on any of the 3 channels, and so that is obviously false. So I have no idea how many people are out there, but I would love to hear from you. So if you are out there, come say, hey, what's up, comment. Most people hang out in the YouTube chat if you want to have some fun with people. However, it is now true that I can see you and hear your chats, or see them rather, from Facebook as well. So anywhere, DLive, Facebook, YouTube, your choice, man. Do what you will. What's up, Trey Clark Theories? What's up, Sasha McDonald? Good to see you guys tonight as well. So, what's up, everybody? We're going to do a special episode today. This is by listener request. Energy Bear is in the house. What's up, Energy Bear? Whoop, whoop. Special request for this episode on rhetoric, and I'm tying in narrative a little bit, just to show how the two are basically one and the same, depending on how you look at it. And so I had done the logical fallacies episode not too long ago. If you want to scroll back, you can find that one. We just went over the most common logical fallacies and examples of them, and sort of just so people could become acquainted with them. A lot of people don't get taught this stuff in school, and it's a shame because these are our sort of basic thinking skills. And so, you know, it's a good episode to familiarize yourself with, or to go check out the book we used, which is The Book of Bad Arguments. It's an awesome book. It's seems to be made for children, but it works for adults as well. So that was a cool one. And we talked about how rhetoric is used against us as well, as illogical arguments are used against us. And they're like, man, they merge seamlessly. And so someone requested, can we go over rhetoric as well? And so we're finally doing that here tonight. So if that's your game, if that's your bag, then that's what we're doing. Oh, I already realized I fucked up, but you guys you'll bear with me. You're nice people. It's not that big of a fuck up. What's up, Sue? Nice to see you. So, as always, I like to show you a few things before we get started. One of them is my site here. This is CoreySharman.com. Also, rogueways.org. They are one and the same. You can check out all kinds of beauty. There's writings, poetry, articles, essays, or some written by other people even, and so that's all really fun if you want to go check it out. You can link to Subscribestar up at the top here in the menu. You can see some old audio versions and download them for free of Rogue Ways. You can see my published works. I know I keep saying it, I keep hyping it, but the sequel to Sine Curve of Aeons is finished. I'm just editing it so slowly. Getting real jobs sucks, and so I've been very busy lately. Working. It actually doesn't suck at all. It's been a rad job to have. But anyway, it's taken a lot of time away from editing. So it is coming, I swear. But you can read the prequel, Sine Curve of Aeons, right here. From Amazon. I think it's $22 now. It's a bit much. But if you hop over to the shop, you can get it for $10. That's including tax, including shipping, anywhere in the United States. And it comes with an inscription. And I usually throw in a Rogue Way stickers, and sometimes I throw in something else. I literally lose money on this deal, and I have 4 left. So if you've been wondering if you want to read Sine Curve of Aeons Vitalis, this is the deal for you. Come check it out. And while you're in the shop, maybe you want to look at a tarot reading or a guidance session or some classes that I teach. Also in the shop, you can get Rogue Ways gear. You can get irreverent merch, like fun t-shirts that say, I survived the coronavirus and all I got was this crappy police state. You can get Organite pendants, and who knows if there's something else hiding in there for you. Go check it out. Those are all good ways to support me and the show. Another excellent way to do that is through Subscribestar. I greatly appreciate my subscribers. It is so cool to be able to do what I love and to get some value back for that. So if you are someone who has found value in Rogueways, please share value back through Subscribestar. There's even a $1 level. Anyone can afford $1. And there's some other levels that give you various types of perks. My favorite is Rogue Soul at the $55 level. That gives you $5 off a tarot reading every month, plus access to all the content on Subscribestar. So if you are into monthly tarot readings, then that is the way to go for you. It is a deal. And of course, you can find every episode of Rogueways that you can't fight on my site on SoundCloud for free. It also is on every single podcast app that you can find. And I really appreciate it if anybody wants to go review it on any of those podcast apps, especially Stitcher or iTunes. Those are the big ones. So, how are we going to do this? I know. Now you see my pictures. My pictures. This is what I'm going to do. There you go. So we're going to talk about rhetoric and narrative and how it's used to control us. And I've rearranged my screens, and so forgive me as I fumble through moving things around. It actually doesn't make any sense. I'm going to rearrange it again. But in the meantime, let me say hi and what's up to Burning Marl. What's up, Burning Marl? Burning Marl is nice. You can tell because Burning Marl says, I'm nice. What's up, Scott Cook in the house? The books won't promote themselves. Man, I'm so bad at self-promotion, but I'm trying to get better at it. And I have some really exciting news about where Rogueways might be headed next. There is a station that is interested in Rogueways, and so I may actually find that I get paid to do this, and that would be amazing. So that could come soon. Stay tuned. I'll tell you more as I learn it. Send your best visualizations of the best possible outcome. That'd be rad. Carolyn Gutman Day is in the house. What's up, Carolyn? So, first of all, let's start off. We're talking about rhetoric. Let's point out that just like when we talked about groupthink and the psychology of the group a couple episodes ago, it is true that humans are psychological creatures. We have very specific routes and habits, in fact, that keep us sort of, easily predictable, perhaps easily controllable. It's seemingly by design that we have these inputs psychologically and these sort of pre-formatted responses. But it's also seemingly by chance. Who knows? It could be a little bit of both, right? But this horrifying aspect of our psychology being so predictable and programmable lends our controllers some sort of tools of absolute perfection with which to corral and guide and control us. And that's not very cool. We don't like to be controlled. I don't, at least. I like freedom. And they force us into all kinds of plots using our psychology against us. And so the saving grace, of course, of that is that with conscious awareness of our psychology, we can disarm any trap that they set for us. And so that's what the goal is today, is to just see through their shit and be able to disarm any trap that they have coming our way, at least more easily, if not, very easily. More easily than before. So we want to start any piece. We're thinking of this both as rhetoric, and rhetoric is really, it's just a word that means like fancy talk, fancy talking. In fact, let's look at the definition of rhetoric. It's like this fancy word that means fancy talk. The art or study of using language effectively and persuasively. So it really does just mean fancy talk, talking good. If you talk good, you're using rhetoric. And so, don't get caught up on this idea that like rhetoric, it sounds so like amazing. It's not. It just means fancy talk. So we're just looking at fancy talk and the way they use fancy talk to like hoodwink us. And of course, when you're getting into any piece of talk, fancy talk with another person that you're an audience, that's receiving your message, you basically are going to structure it like a narrative. And any good narrative starts out with a hook. You know this. You think back to English, right? Always starts with a hook. If any of my students are out there listening to this, they're like, fuck your hooks. God damn it. I'm so sick of hooks. But it's true. Any good piece of rhetoric starts with a hook. The headline is the hook, right? In any article we read. So here you say the definitive history of George Bush doesn't care about black people. That's not that great of a hook, but it's a hook. It even has a Subtitle: The story behind Kanye West's most famous remarks. Right? Even every article we read has a hook. Everything, we use hooks without even meaning to. Like half the time when you like see a person who you haven't seen for a while and you're like, after you say hello, you're like, dude, there was this fucking thing, it was crazy. That's your hook. Now they're like, ooh, what's the thing that was crazy? Right? And you're gonna tell them the story that they missed since last time they talked to you. What's up, Lloyd? Tucker Carlson's in the house. We got Biggie Smollett also. Dude, 2 places at once. You're a time traveler. Chad Clemens is here. Lacey Mariposa, whoop whoop, and it still says 0 people are watching. Of course it does. So the hook, it's usually, like I said, a bold statement like this. So the headline is the example. What we said about when you see somebody after a long time was an example, but also Kanye West sitting on a NPR money-raising marathon or whatever and suddenly proclaiming George Bush does not care about black people. That was a pretty big hook. That was like shocking to everyone. Everyone stopped and was like, what did he just say? And that's exactly what you want a hook to do. You want it to stop people and make them go, what the hell did he just say? So that was a hook. And that got us all into talking about whether or not Hurricane Katrina was sort of an opportunity for the eugenicists to take out a bunch of black people. So it was an effective hook. Right? So we see this working on all kinds of levels. Oh, maybe his hook was actually, yo, I'm going to ad-lib a little bit. That could have been his actual hook. But either way, right? This introduced us to something. I'm not saying that this was a, contrived moment by the elite Illuminati to manipulate us, but it could have been. But I'm just pointing out how effective a hook can be. I could play this, but you won't hear it, I think. Let's try. Can you hear it? No? Okay. Anyway, it's sad. He actually sounds really emotional and like he really means it. But this, if you remember this moment, you know what I'm saying. That's just one example of a hook. We also have a hook in the form of, what the hell? In the form of emotional appeals. So a bold statement like George Bush doesn't care about black people can be a hook, and so can an emotional screeching. That can also be a hook. People stop and pay attention when they hear emotion. And so when you put a child up on a screen and she says, you have stolen my childhood, that is an emotional appeal, but it's also a hook. Now we're all like, fuck, what's this emotion going on? Let me pay attention and learn more. How did we steal her childhood, right? It's both a bold statement and an emotional appeal. And they're both good hooks. They both get us to stop and pay attention, even if we don't like it, I'm like, what? Who is this silly child that's supposedly representing the entire world? But it made me pay attention, didn't it? Jersey Bob is in the house. What's up? Kathy Smith is here. Woo! And Mariel Reeves. Mariel, just so you know, most people are on YouTube, so there may be 2 people on Facebook, but there's maybe 12 we see in YouTube, and who knows how many in D Live. I like Burning Marl points out that Mike Myers went stiff. He was good at improv, but not in that moment that Kanye went off script. But yeah, so we have the emotional screeching of anyone, really, will often make most people stop and pay attention. It's a good hook. It's an effective hook to bring forth this passion and fury and emotion and get people hooked into your narrative. We're still at the beginning of the narrative. So the narrative starts with this hook that makes people pay attention, right? One of the things that we know about humans and the human brain is that humans respond to novelty more than anything else. Our brains get used to something, and basically at the core of our brains are looking, is this a threat or is it food? Like, do I need this or do I need to run from it? Right? And so anything that's been seen and heard over and over again, it doesn't really get our attention anymore because we're like, okay, I've already sorted that into threat, not threat, opportunity, not opportunity. And so I don't really need to pay attention, right? We start to like zone things out. We start to just not pay attention. And so something new will catch our eye. It will make us pay attention, and it will draw us in. In fact, this is one of the keys to staying happy as you live through a long, long life, is trying new things. And that's exactly why it keeps your brain engaged and excited about things. And they know this. And that's why some hooks come in the form of presenting an entirely new experience to us. When had humans ever at a mass scale experienced a toilet paper dilemma? Never, right? And all of a sudden we had this fantastic hook. This is the best hook I think I've ever seen because it's so novel. It was definitely a bold statement saying toilet paper is gone. You can't wipe your ass. And it was pretty emotional. As someone I respect deeply pointed out, we all probably have some sort of deep trauma associated with, if not circumcision, then with potty training, right? Most of us probably have some sort of trauma. It doesn't mean that you're like fucked up and you have PTSD. It's just, it wasn't fun for us to switch from being able to shit and piss whenever we wanted to going into, the toilet all the time. The toilet's a scary place for a lot of kids, and they're often forced into it through shame and like bullying and intimidation and whatever. We all probably have some trauma tied up with our genitalia. And so to target toilet paper, it also is emotional. So it's a bold claim, it's an emotional appeal, and it's a novel. This is a really effective hook to start a narrative. And remember, this is all about rhetoric. This is all about fancy talk and trying to control our psychology. And so they did a really good job here. And we're still just at the hook. They got us hooked in. We were like, fuck, toilet paper? What? Right? Then we started getting into why toilet paper? Like, oh, I guess there's this virus. Oh, I guess we're going to be locked down. Like, oh shit, we're going to like all die. Like we would have maybe never even paid attention very much if they didn't start with toilet paper. But they fucking got us, didn't they? It worked. All these videos of toilet paper empty. Who knows if it even like had to be real, right? It's just the story. It's the narrative. They're weaving it together and telling the story, and we get hooked in. So that was a great hook. Another very novel thing that we have never seen before that has also started to get us hooked into a narrative was this 8-minute, 46-second choking of a man on camera. I've never seen a man choked for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and I doubt many people have. And you could fucking watch the whole thing. The whole sick, slow, sordid-ass thing. I'll be honest, I still haven't, because I'm not interested in watching torture or, like, whether it's real or not, right? But that was a good hook. Like, people fucking paid attention to that. They were like, what? You can watch this whole video of this guy choking? And unless you're into, like, Faces of Death or Snuff, you've not seen that. That's a novel thing. It's novel. It's emotional. Some bold-ass claims came out of it, too, right? So this was a really good hook, too. These are examples of really good hooks and how you hook people into the narrative that you are going to weave around them and within them, right? That's the hook. That's the art of rhetoric, using narrative and starting with the most important part, which is the hook. I love it. Jersey Bob said we can use the Sears catalog when we ran out of toilet paper. For sure. That we were never in danger, ever. But it fucked with us on a deep psychological issue as a nation. It didn't matter, but it mattered so much. It was crazy. Yeah. So, past the hook, now you got people hooked, right? Now what do? You're just starting. You're just starting to weave your rhetoric. You're just starting to use your fancy talk to get people into where you want them to go psychologically. And after you hook them, it's time to fill in the backstory. The hook doesn't matter if we don't then learn, well, why the fuck do I care? You're like, wait, all the toilet paper is gone? Okay, I can wipe with Sears catalog or whatever, but why should I care? What's the backstory? Oh, there's a virus that's already, gone through China, right? They start to fill in the backstory. Just like now, after the, George Floyd hook came out, and now we're all focused on this horrifying video of murder. Now we're going to tell the backstory. There's actually 400 years of oppression, and I'm not saying there's not. In fact, I think most people I've ever met knew very clearly that this is true, but Apparently, we're presenting this as a novel thing, even though it's not. So it's interesting. Your brain is supposed to recognize novel things, and it should recognize this as not a novel thing, but apparently it's working. So this woman, Nicole Hannah Jones, works at the New York Times, which is like the just center of shilliness. She was asked to write about Black Americans as agents of the country's democracy, and she submitted a draft of 16,000 words. And we're supposed to be really impressed by that. We're supposed to say, wow, she wrote 16,000 words. That's amazing. Like, it's not. Any writer can write that really easily. And she points out how in a single essay could you tell the sweep of 400 years. And so she's really laying out this 400 years of racial inequality and making sure she's doing it in an emotional way. And they tie it into all of these various appeals that we could go into, but we won't. But it's just the idea that once you've hooked people, you've got to fill in the backstory, right? People have to know, like, oh, why do I really care about this? Do I care about this? Oh, this story tells me that there's actually 400 years of oppression. I really care about oppression, so I care about this, right? They're getting us hooked in psychologically. We've got the hook. We got the backstory. Backstory is important. You all do it. I do it. I'll be like people watching, and I'll be like, that person, they do this for a living, and they're like this type of a person. I fill in the backstory for myself. What's up, Band for Life Bear? Big love back at you. Sue Finelli points out an interesting thing about 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which is how long George Floyd was allegedly choked before he died, and that is the time that the first plane hit on 9/11. And that is an interesting coincidence, right? We're supposed to believe in coincidence. By the way, get your Rogue Ways mug. They're great. Steve Mercer can tell you all about it. So once you've got people hooked, you've got the backstory. You still can have people easily at this point be like, oh, okay, I mean, I guess there was toilet paper gone, and I guess there was like a fucking flu in China or something, but like, why do I care? Right? Like some people are already hooked and running no matter what at this point, and that was as little as it took. But some people need more than the hook and the backstory. And so then you start creating unity. You start creating unity on purpose. You create team cohesion, right? They practice this at the highest levels. They practice strengthening interpersonal connection and we-ness. Because then you remain connected and motivated to be with the group. And this goes back to the groupthink episode. And if you missed it, you should watch it or engage yourself in that topic. It's fascinating. And so there's all of these methods of creating a we mentality, right? But when you're in rhetoric and you don't have the time like these, corporate people do to sort of mold your team into the we mentality, then you rely on specific keywords. And so you, as a consumer of media, have heard most of these words when people are referring to you, especially if it's in like a newscast or something, or if it's a politician, or depending on what is happening in that specific narrative they're trying to weave for you, they will call you various things. They will use we, right? I do it too in classrooms and stuff, and you probably do it when you're like even subconsciously when you're trying to connect yourself with a group and create a group ideology, or not ideology, but mentality. It's not a bad thing inherently. It's just you have to watch for it when people are using it, because you might not want to be part of their fucking group that they're creating and placing you inside of. But words like citizen, right? Citizens blank. Citizens feel like this, and the citizens are doing this, and you're implied, you're a citizen, so you're an implied part of whatever they're saying at that moment, right? You're a citizen. You most often are going to be called a consumer. That's unfortunate, but true. You might be called a taxpayer. That's less common because nobody really wants to remind people like that we pay taxes and probably don't like it. And more recently, you're going to be called black or white, or a person of color if you're not black. And more frequently lately, you will not be called a female or a male, because those terms are triggering to some people apparently. You might be called a mother or a father, right? Mothers everywhere are saying, and so we feel da-da-da, and you're already starting to be like, I'm a part of this group. I'm a mom, and I'm a we. And so subconsciously even, you're like identifying with it. And they know this. They might call you business owners. They might call you Christians. They might call you whatever, depending on their goals, right? They create that mentality. So you've hooked people in. possibly with a novel emotional thing, a bold statement. You filled in some backstory. You're like, this is the reason why you care, right? Here's this shit that was going on before now. And now you're creating all this unity as you go. Like, we care about this as citizens and mothers. We care about our children, and we want to stop oppression, right? And you're like, oh my God, I'm a mom and I want to stop oppression. None of these things are untrue. And they're not even that bad. Again, like I said, these are just tools. They can be used really well, and they can be used to manipulate the fuck out of you. Thank you, Burning Marl. The groupthink episode was pretty cool. I know there's some people who are like, yeah, I know all this shit, but I'm like, well, cool, don't watch this episode. Like, it doesn't matter. Some people don't. This was literally requested, and I think it's an awesome thing to go over, even if you are familiar with it, to remind yourself of, like, see through all these pieces of the rhetorical and narrative that they're spinning around us all the time. Wisdom Trek is in the house. Yes, society is pretty fucking toxic, and it is best to disconnect as much as possible. Be in the world, not of the world. Is that what they say? Whatever that thing is, I like it. I like that statement, however I'm supposed to say it. So once you have hooked people in, filled in the backstory, created unity using we and groupthink aspects and labeling group members, and giving people an identity in your group that you've created, now it's time to address, right? Because again, at every single one of these moments, what you're basically doing is saying most of the sheep are corralled already, but there are some who still think, and they're still doing what? And so I need to address the what that they're doing. And at this point, there's people who are starting to go like, wait, even though I'm a mother and I don't like oppression, isn't it true that no one in that video of George Floyd was wearing masks? And so maybe it didn't even happen recently, and maybe this is all made up, right? You have critical thinkers who are going to start to come up with counter arguments and say like, oh, what about, that like actually there's been less and less police violence over time and we're getting better and better. Why should we defund and destroy all the police? Right. So you have to address the counter argument. You have to paint the counter argument in a horrible way. You have to bring up their arguments that they are going to make anyway, and you have to destroy it. And you know this from basic persuasion. If you've ever done a persuasive essay, your teacher will tell you, address the counter arguments, and that's what they do. So a lot of times recently, we're going to see them, painting ahead of time anyone who disagrees as something that everyone already knows is horrible, right? So we see a lot of like, well, you're a racist if you're not doing what I'm doing, which is not even true, but it's good enough for a lot of really stupid people to then completely stop listening to whatever line of thought had been going on before that, right? Or they'll say, you're a science denier. Well, nobody wants to deny science, so now that person is completely discounted. They'll say, really, really a lot lately, they'll say, you're a Nazi. And I'm like, wow, a Nazi is anything I don't like, I guess. Or they'll say something like, these people are fighting to hold on to slave culture mentality because they're, too scared to be made the slaves themselves or something. And it's like, it sounds fancy and good, but like, is that really what people are doing? Like, I don't know, probably not, right? Or these people are just still trying to like control Black people and tell Black people how they can and can't feel about George Floyd by telling them not to riot. It's like, no, that's also not what I'm doing, but way to like pretend to address the counter arguments by painting the entirety of the critical thinkers and the resistors to the narrative as horrifying people, right? Like we saw it with Greta. And people said that anybody who didn't believe what Greta believed was a misogynistic climate denier. If you didn't support this child skipping school, this child who's had, a lot of mental illness and emotional unwellness and not perhaps the clearest of rational minds and not necessarily the entirety of sort of point of view and whatever that you get as you live many, many years on Earth. And clearly, if a child is this passionate about something, they've been heavily programmed and coached about it. And so, but if you ask any of those questions or point any of those things out, you're a misogynistic climate denier, right? You're a right-wing male, apparently. You hate her and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez so much because, you are misogynistic and a climate denier. It's just so simple. I mean, this is supposedly a respectable reg here, right? But this is like literally their line, is that anybody who doesn't like Greta is a misogynistic fucking right-wing climate denier. It's amazing. And so this is their version of addressing the counter-argument instead of actually addressing any counter-arguments. And that goes back to the logical fallacy episode. If you want to see how this is a, kind of a form of equivocation or not a cause for a cause, all kinds of logical fallacies up in here, right? But it was effective because a lot of people stopped talking at that point, right? A lot of people were like, well, fuck, I don't want to be like a child-hating, misogynist, right-wing fucking climate denier. That sounds bad. And so, I'm gonna not do that anymore. And that's, like I said, it's not actually addressing counter arguments. It'd be cool if we were a society in which we actually addressed counter arguments. That would be rad. But instead, they just paint the counter arguments as anything that the group has already accepted as evil, like misogynist, Nazi, etc. You get it. So again, now we're at the point. We've got most of the sheep hooked in. We've got a little bit more bought in with the backstory that we told that was probably emotional. We've created unity in the group by using the words we, and like certain identity words that make people, identify with the movement. And then we still had some resistors, and so we painted all their counter arguments in the most horrifying way possible. And this whole time, we have been repeating over and over and over our narrative, right? For anybody, whether they already believed in us or didn't believe in us, we've been repeating it over and over again this whole time. It's been in the hook, it's been in the backstory, it's been in the, the painting of the counter argument as horrible. All of it has included these repetitions because repetition is the most basic form of mind control. And we all know this. We have it repeated over and over again. No more does anyone think or question it because it's been repeated so many times. Why would you even question it, right? The earth is a globe. 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 You're like, oh, the earth is a globe. You don't even question it anymore. It's been repeated so many times. What do they say? I think they say it in this article. Most people need to hear something more than once for it to really sink in. That makes sense. You don't just automatically change your mind the first time you hear something. And this is why a lot of us in this community like to go out and drop our ideas in public so that some people will have yet another opportunity to really hear what we're saying, even though most of them will just screech wildly and try to stab us in the face. Here it is, the rule of 7. So it's 7 times, apparently, that the human brain needs to hear something before it will really start to, settle into the mind. That's not that many times. I mean, they do it way more than that. You can see those clips back in the 9/11 days where Dick Cheney and Bush and all these people were saying over and over again, the weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction. And we all know at this point there was never any weapons of mass destruction, but it was good enough to just repeat it so many times that people were like, of course there are. It was repeated many times, so I know it was true. Because our psychology is that simple. Right? I like this point here in 1965 when they were doing this research on how repetition works in the mind. He said that 3 levels of psychological awareness, curiosity, recognition, and decision could be achieved with just 3 exposures. This is a good thing and a bad thing. It's good for all of us, because if we go into whatever random group and we're like, yo, fucking 9/11 was an inside job, peace out. That's one, right? And if someone else does it another couple days after and someone else does, eventually people are going to be curious at least, what is this shit that these people are saying? And they're going to recognize it. Oh, that's that shit people say. And eventually they're going to make a decision. Yeah, do you think that it was an inside job? Or nah, those people are crazy, right? But at least we got them to think about it. So they know this too. They repeat it. 7, I guess, is the base sort of level. Exposure effect. It found that effect reaches at a maximum between 10 and 20 exposures. I'm sure they're going for far more than that. I'm sure they're going for everyone having exposure to whatever narrative they're pulling, whatever rhetorical narrative they're trying to set in motion. I'm sure they're going to repeat it hundreds of times. So Repeat, repeat, repeat. And again, we teach this in writing. You have to repeat your point over and over and over again for it to be effective, allegedly. We got Chris Phoenix up in the house now. What? Scott Cook, I don't know if I said hi to you, but hi. And I don't know what you mean. It drives me nuts when they just use numbers such as 1 in 5. Oh, like 1 in 5 people say da da da. You're like, okay, like who says who? Which people did you ask? I love it when they're like 80% of people think wearing masks is good. I'm like, did you ask 80% of people that you found in a store for masks? Or like, where did you find those Evas? That's not what I see on the street, but yeah. Pretty crazy. Better late than never. That's right, Chris. And some people don't believe the lies no matter how many times it's repeated. That's true. That's us. We're here to prove it. They wish that we would, but we don't. Yeah, good point. Motion and Color. What's up, Motion and Color? Nice to see you. And Motion and Color says, any store you go in now will repeat the social distancing meme and the safety, blah, blah. It's seriously driving me nuts. Like, I was seriously in the store the other night. We're looking for something, and I, like, realized there's whatever on the intercom playing in, like, the soothing, like, NLP voice, and we're going to control your mind now. And it's like, they were like, remember, when you go to the bathroom, wash your hands. And I was like, what the fuck happened in the world that you thought that people didn't know that? Like, how is this your message at the grocery store over the loudspeaker? Like, are we retarded 2-year-olds? Like, what the fuck happened? And then, of course, people are like, not everybody does know. I'm like, well, yeah, like, I mean, but we don't, like, cater to the lowest possible person we can find in the fucking stack. Like, we used to cater to the middle, at least. Like, I don't know. It drives me crazy. I'm like, oh, and if you, like, fucking stab yourself in the face, remember to put a Band-Aid on. Like, dude, duh. Or I don't know, man. It just drives me nuts. Yeah, Burning Marl's right. I should do a whole episode where I just, like, prove the effectiveness of this by doing all of these rhetorical methods in one episode, trying to get paid memberships on Subscribestar. Good call. Probably not going to happen, but I like it. But while we're talking about it, head over to subscribestar.com/rogue-ways and subscribe at the $1 level or higher. That'd be rad. I appreciate you. Yeah, it is like a horror movie, Sue. It's seriously like I just feel like I'm in crazy town this whole time. I said last night to Johnny when we were watching, I don't even remember which bizarre, stupid thing happened last night, but something. And I said, dude, we're seriously living in, like, a crazy child's, like, fucking whack-ass dream. Like, that's what life is like now. Like, none of it even makes any sense. And we're just gonna run with it. But, yeah, so that's where we're at with Rhetoric. So we've got the people hooked. We've got the backstory filled. We've hooked them in with that more. We're using we and creating groupthink, and we've got them even more attached. For the people that are still thinking we are painting all counter-arguments as just horrifying, why would you even think that, you Nazi, crazy, misogynist, like, whatever. And the whole time we've been repeating our message as many times as possible. And by now, most people are hooked, right? We're done. But just in case anybody was still, like, maybe about to, like, slip back out of the trance or whatever, we make sure we throw in plenty of appeals. And appeals, these are all, everything we're about to look at is a logical fallacy. So it's straight up logical fallacy to make an appeal to ethos, pathos, or logos. It just doesn't, it's not logical, right? But people do it all the time because it works really, really well. People get convinced by this. And any commercial on earth that you show me, we can find ethos, pathos, and logos in it. Obviously every speech, obviously every single newscast, like, this is just what people do. It's not logical, it makes no sense, but it works. So ethos, if you don't know, it just means sort of like authority in Latin. It means ethic or character, I guess. I always think of it as authority because you're basically appealing to authority, right? A credible source. You're using ethos appeals to show the audience that you're a credible source and worth listening to, or that the information you're providing has come from a credible source that's worth listening to. So you might have someone say something like, well, I mean, the president said to eat bleach, so gotta eat it, right? Which never happened, but that would be an appeal to ethos if you were trying to get someone to eat bleach. It might be even better if you said the CDC. I mean, that's like the CDC, like who doesn't listen to the CDC? Like that's an authority figure. They have ethics and character, and they say to eat bleach. And now you're like really appealing to ethos. Then you might go even a step higher and be like, dude, the UN, whatever their fucking thing is, they said, what is it? Why can't I remember like the international level of health? Anyway, whatever they knew, they said to eat bleach, right? And then by now people are like, oh my God, all these really important people say to eat bleach. I really got to think about whether or not I should eat bleach or not. I like that they point out that ethos can be developed by choosing a language that is appropriate for the audience and the topic, and choosing the proper level of vocabulary. If I use bigger words and I stop swearing and I speak a little slower and I have a certain tone, that adds to the ethos of the presentation. And so this is why you'll see newscasters using very specific grammar and syntax and presenting themselves in the way they look in a very specific way. These things all add to the ethos appeals, right? So if they came out in the very first place with the ethos intact, that's always better. Pathos is just emotion, right, in Latin. So an appeal to pathos is an emotional appeal. You're like, well, fuck, why do you hate children and you want them all to die? And you're like, I don't. They're like, well, then you should probably stop global warming. I'm like, oh, okay. Like that. Again, none of these are based on logic. They're all, in fact, logical fallacies. But people use them, right? Well, you wouldn't want this seal to die, so you should probably donate money to my seal saving conservancy program. I like that they point out that the pathos doesn't have to be one in which things are positive. In fact, the negative ones seem to work better. So another use of pathos would be to inspire anger from an audience, perhaps in order to prompt action. Oh, that's interesting. Pathos doesn't mean emotion, apparently. Pathos is the Greek word for suffering and experience. Wow. That's sad. So we see it in 1984 when they trigger their people to hate, what's his name? Not Weinstein, I forget his name, but the bad guy, the fake bad guy. And they're all throwing shit at the screen and like freaking out. It's very effective to manipulate people when you can get them to feel emotional. It is often sympathy that is invoked, like I was saying with the baby seals, but it's often anger. And I think we see this with the George Floyd situation as well. That's a strong appeal to pathos, and it is primarily drawing on anger, which makes sense. I forget what Mars was doing, but was there like a full moon in Mars that day? So there was something about that, like astrologically, that like our anger energy might have been at a height, and we had just been locked in our houses and our entire economy crushed for like months. And so a lot of anger was probably built up, and it was a perfect sort of trigger to unleash that and to draw on that in this rhetorical narrative that they're spinning. And finally, we have an appeal to logos, which sounds great. In fact, this is the only one that could possibly be used without using it as a logical fallacy, but it would have to actually be logical for it to not be a logical fallacy. And then oftentimes appeals to logos aren't necessarily logical, and that doesn't really make sense. But basically someone can misuse facts, because logos is an appeal to logic, like I said, or fact or reason. But we see, as someone already pointed out in the chat, that many people will misuse facts or misuse statistics. Bill Gates famously has himself next to that stack of books, and the top one is How to Lie with Statistics. This is an old trope. There's even I think it's Yogi Bear or something, whatever, who says, there's lies, damned lies, and statistics. It's, if you take a statistics class, they tell you like basically all statistics are just lies, because you're basically in a way cherry picking information and facts in order to show what you want to show, and you leave out all the details that don't show what you want to show. So that's why, even though this is an appeal to logic and fact, it's more often a logical fallacy than not. We are convinced by fact. We are rational, reasonable people who like to use logic, but it's just not our primary stopping place, right? Like, if we get to logos and it is actually logical, that's an achievement in this day and age. We're more often stopped at the sort of primal reptilian level of emotion. And so they'll throw logos in there, or a seeming logos, into their rhetoric, and it often will be a misrepresentation. So you just have to watch out for any of these very effective rhetorical devices. Appeal to ethos, pathos, and logos. And it does. It trumps the logic of most people when you do this. It's really, really effective. We have all seen it. We've all seen people we love fall to especially the pathos appeal, where they're like made to feel guilty, and so leaning or kneeling in the streets and literally licking the boots of random black people they've never met seems like a really good idea, right? We've all seen that happening. No, not Winston. Winston was the main character. I was talking about the bleeding goat. It starts with a W, I think. I just cannot remember his name. The bad guy. The fake bad guy that they put up for them to hate. So, yeah. Where are we now? Let me see. Sorry, I catch up with the chat every once in a while, and then I, lose my place. Oh, okay, so you hooked people in. You filled in the backstory. You created the we consciousness. You painted every counter-argument in a horrifying way. You repeated your message over and over and over and over again. You had appeal to pathos, logos, and ethos built in the whole way, and you still want to make sure this whole time that you are making it as personal as possible to the listener, right? Even children. I mean, you're starting to see all levels of this in each of these things, right? We've got the hook in here. We're going to have a backstory in here. We've got appeals to pathos already in the headline. All of these things are interweaved throughout the whole thing, but we're just going through one at a time. So even children who are not vulnerable to coronavirus can contribute to societal spread. And this poor grandma would be the victim if that happened. Can you picture your grandma just trying to live her goddamn life and some fucking kid comes along and murders her with COVID? Right? If you haven't made it personal and you haven't asked them to imagine in their own life how this thing might play out, then you have not done your rhetorical job. You're not very persuasive. Because if someone hasn't used the power of their imagination to create this as a reality in their mind for themselves, then they are not bought in yet. So they always will make it personal as possible. Most of us can relate directly to having children we care about, even if we don't have kids, and to having grandparents we care about, even if they're dead. So there's pretty simple ways to get people to buy in. The baby seal thing might not be as effective for everyone, so you want to make it more personal than that. You want to make it as universally personal as possible, as weird as that sounds. Goldstein, thank you, Burning Marl. Goldstein was it, not Weinstein. Goldstein was the bad guy. Yes. Oh, Scott Cook said it. Goldstein, yes. Thank you, guys. Chris is summing up everything already, saying, so in other words, don't trust anyone or anything and do your own research to form an educated opinion divorced from emotion. Yes, absolutely. That is the message. That is the absolute message. Especially when you see things like this, where they're trying to get you to become personally involved, right? Well, you saw those fucking horrible, I should have brought that up. Maybe I can find, no, I can't hear the sound anyway, but you saw those stupid ass ads that were at the beginning of every movie for a while. Maybe they still are, I don't go to movies, but it was you wouldn't steal from your grandma and you wouldn't rape a fucking penguin, and you're like, what the fuck? And it's you shouldn't then also download things for free. They're using this level of manipulation, right? You have to imagine it personally hurting somebody that you would love in order to care about downloading, because nobody gives a fuck about downloading shit, and they knew that. So they had to try their best rhetoric to get us to buy into their paradigm. And it didn't work for most of us, but it was a good try. Here's a random piece that you can use if you're really on your rhetorical narrative creating game. And that's to use color. or sound, or any sense, really, because there's various senses. Again, we're talking about psychology at the base of it here. All of this leads back to very basic aspects of our psychology that make this shit work. So if you're really on your game and you've got all the shit we've talked about down, you also came out in the first place wearing specific colors, right? Specific colors on your like clothes that you're wearing and your makeup or whatever, specific colors in the background, and at key moments of your presentation, whether it's audio, video, or whatever, you have other, colors and sounds playing to emphasize this. It's very, very simple. We're all very used to it, especially when we watch movies. We know there's going to be these types of sounds that mean this is like a really bad situation. There's going to be good sounds. It's like, oh, things are going to get better. And scary sounds and all these, colors, all of it. We all know this at a base level. And just recognizing it is what is nice. I loved there's this Far Side comic where it's like, maybe we can find it. I don't remember if that's even the right words, but maybe it'll come up. It was a Far Side comic and it was like a raccoon. No, of course not. Man, I used to be able to find shit on the internet. Anyway, it's like a Far Side comic and it's like, Rocky Raccoon knew there was no danger because the music was peaceful in the background. And it is, when we notice things like this, we know it's true. And this is really simple, right? But some of them are pretty interesting, actually, like which colors we associate with what. So we know that red can stand for power. It can make us stop. It can make us feel anxious. It's a very strong color. It's one of the first colors we ever see as a baby, an infant. You'll see that a lot of infant, brand new, newborn stuff is red, black, and white, and that's because those are the first colors they see. So it's kind of primary in our brain to notice red. And you can philosophize all you want about why. Orange can be warm feeling. It can tell us to relax and kind of open up. And there's also this idea that it's high quality and low cost. It's so weird. It's really specific when they get into advertising, like what specific colors do. Yellow has joy associated with it. Green obviously has nature and growth and sort of interpersonal connection associated with it. Light blue can lower our blood pressure. Obviously, that's very calming. It's peaceful. I've heard it can make us eat less. Or maybe that's dark blue. Interesting. In Japan, blue streetlights were installed in the hopes of preventing crime on certain streets as well as suicides at popular railway stations. Wow. Clear thoughts. Purple. I thought purple was a spiritual feeling for people. Men listed as their least favorite color and women as their most favorite, but I've also heard that kids will always pull purple out of the crayon box. Like 100, not 100, but like something like 85 or something percent of kids, of both sexes. Pink. Prisoners placed in a cell, painted bright bubblegum pink, immediately became less aggressive and their muscles relaxed. Interesting that pink would do that even though it's a red tone. White. A lack of aggression. I hate white walls though. Hospitals that just are white everywhere, really anywhere that's just white everywhere, I really don't like it. It's so boring. Sleek but boring. Black. Of course, every angsty teenager overuses black, they say, but black can be aggressive and we can associate it with negativity, etc. Of course, these colors can change based on culture, so I would guess this is a Western sort of cultural look at these colors. But, like, just thinking about the fact that they use colors, somebody was pointing out not long ago that there was something with pink and purple that was all over the place, and it had something to do with something I can't remember. Someone is listening right now and being like, it's this, but I didn't really get into it. But the other day, pink and purple was a big deal. They seemed to be encoding us with pink and purple for some reason. So you got to pay attention to that shit too. Like I said, it gets really, sorry, I got something in my eye at the same time, my throat hurt really bad. So you'll just have to deal with me crying a little bit. And while I cry, I'll see what you guys are doing in the chat. Roy Gabiv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Nice. This is getting interesting. Well, thank you. No way. Chris Phoenix says women can see more colors than men. Fact. Google it. Men are more colorblind than women. Wow. I had no idea. You know what's sees the most color? Shit. It's a mantis shrimp. Is that right? Yeah. This fucking thing. This crazy this crazy creature is amazing. I don't know if you guys saw the fucking comic that somebody made about it. Maybe I can find it. Just while we're on the topic of color and who sees. Yeah, this is it. Is this it? No, that's not it. There's an entire... Is this it? Yes. This is the mantis shrimp. In less than 3,000th of a second, it can strike prey with 1,500 newtons of force. That's this thing here. Look at how beautiful it is, though. This thing is a mad killer. If human beings could accelerate our arms at 1/10 that speed, we'd be able to throw a baseball into orbit. Their limbs move so quickly, the water around them boils. That's fucking insane. Have you guys seen this shit? This shit is wild. I know this is totally a tangent, but it's amazing. This is a process called supercavitation. When these cavitation bubbles collapse, it produces an undersea shock wave. It can kill prey even if the mantis shrimp misses its target. That's crazy. The force of these collapsing bubbles also produces temperatures in the range of several thousand kelvins and emits tiny bursts of light. Like it fucking like bursts dimensions. That's crazy. This is sonoluminescence. These are my murder sticks. They are many like it, but these ones are mine. Using these murder sticks, dismemberment is primarily how the mantis shrimp kills its prey. It lashes out other animals to pieces, smashing apart crabs, mollusks, oysters, and octopi until deliciousness squirts out. Their limbs are so resilient, researchers have been studying their cell structure for use in the development of advanced body armor for combat troops. Yeah. Anyway, that's the mantis shrimp. It sees more. I don't know why it wasn't in this comic. There must be more than one comic about the mantis shrimp, but they see more color than any other creature on Earth, allegedly. I don't know how we know that, but that's supposedly true. So, yeah, that's color for you. Oh, thank you, Celestial Peace. Celestial Peace, it says, pinks and purples are at the end of the visible spectrum. Oh, right, because ultraviolet and, what's the red one? Yeah, the red one are on the either end of the spectrum. Okay, so anyway, Celestial Peace says, pinks and purples are at the end of the visible spectrum. It signifies illusion when used in mainstream narrative. Thank you. Excellent. That's exactly what I was trying to think of and didn't know well enough to say. Band for Life Bear says, they break fish tanks in real life. Wow, that's crazy. So don't put one in a fish tank. These guys are meant to be free at the bottom of the ocean. So yeah, I think it was Candace Owen had a bunch of pink and purple on some of her shit the other day. And that was, I guess, signifying illusion. It's interesting. It's an interesting line of thought. So you got to think about the way they use colors to program us and to, you know, finagle our psychology into the things that they like. Of course, the thing that you have to make sure to do is offer a reward for complying with the narrative and for going along with it. And so our brain, of course, has reward systems. And I know that you know this, but it's interesting to think of how they use this in rhetoric and how they use this in the creation of social narratives and manipulation. So, you know, we technically, what do they say? Technically, the only things we like are oxytocin and dopamine or something. And these are the things in our brain that give us reward feelings, reward pathways. And so it teaches us to keep doing those things. And, you know, it's created allegedly because it keeps us alive. We're like, oh, I like sweets and fats and that keeps me fed. And I like sleep. And so I'm going to, you know, that keeps me repaired or whatever. So we have these systems and they use these systems to control us, right? they have, this is so scary because this is from like the 60s or whatever. But they put in, where is it? They put in little electronic things in the rats. Why can't I find it? How come I can find it so easily before I'm live? And then when I'm live, I'm like, where's the place? Fuck it, whatever. They put electric stimulation on the rat's brains, and the rat, one of the rats like pressed the button to stimulate that part of the brain to give itself this reward feeling like 2,500 times within a minute or something. It was crazy. Oh, here we go. Nope, that's not it either. Well, it's in here, I promise, but we're not going to read it together, so you can go check this out if you want to. But you understand the point. Oxytocin, endorphins, dopamine, these things are scientifically, you know, we get addicted to them, and so they know this. And so we saw it too with Facebook and other, you know, social media and devices, that we get addicted to them, and they know this, and they do it on purpose, and we know that they do it on purpose. And so we all, I hope at this point in our lives, are trying to find ways to break that addiction, or at least like limit its effect on us, maybe by limiting our time or doing it only in certain ways or whatever. I'm trying. Hope you're trying too, because I don't like to think that they're controlling me, and I know they are at some level. But the more we're aware of it, the less they're going to be able to do it, right? And that's the whole point. I kind of agree with you, Chris. Octopuses are pretty amazing creatures. Thank you, Burning Marl. I get that a lot, that people enjoy my random episodes more than the interviews. I think I've got a little bit of both. Some people like the interviews way better, and some people like this better, but I'm glad that people enjoy it. And it sucks that my chat is on the opposite side of my microphone, so hopefully you guys have been able to hear me every time I look away. So yeah, Facebook obviously has utilized these methods of making us addicted, but it's interesting because they actually break it down into how and like what types of things made us addicted to things like Facebook, TikTok, and Google and all this stuff. And it's the same things that our controllers try to use in a much larger way, in a societally important way, to keep us doing certain things. So they have this intermittent variable rewards, right? And this is the idea that like you're not really sure when you're going to get this reward, but it could happen, and so you're going to keep doing the thing that might get the reward. Because you've learned that it could happen 3 times in a row, it could happen once and not again for 10 years, but it might happen, so you're going to keep doing the thing. We see it in video games with the sort of chests that are like randomly generated rewards in them. Sometimes it's amazing, so we'll go out of our way to make sure we get that chest. And sometimes it's just like a simple potion, but it was still like, okay, you still got something. I think the lotto is a pretty good example of this, right? You may have like won a scratch ticket once or twice, so you keep like buying lotto tickets for the rest of your life, and you keep working your sorry ass job hoping that you will win the lottery. They have this Zeigarnik effect. Where do they go into that? See, again, I have to like start highlighting the parts that I want ahead of time, but to do that, you have to have different shit than what I'm doing. So the Zeigarnik effect, if that's how you say it, occurs when an activity that has been interrupted may be more readily recalled. So they interrupt you in order to make you highlight that sort of moment. Weird. I've never actually even heard of this. It postulates that people remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed tasks. So isn't that interesting that even when I got to this exact site, maybe it'll happen again when I refresh. Yeah, this shit pops up. And now we're supposed to be like, oh, now I'm even more focused on Guru Focus, this site and what it says to me. And Facebook started doing that too, as far as I'm concerned, when it started adding ads that will just like show up in the midst of your scrolling, or now they have those fucking banners that'll just pop up sometimes and be like, hey, why don't you give money to Black Lives Matter? And you're like, why don't you butt the fuck out of my life, you piece of shit? Austin Beach is here. What's up, Austin Beach? I rarely use my phone. I want to be like you, Chris. I want to use my phone less and less and less. I really want to go back to like the flip phones or the slider phones with the full keyboard and like very few capabilities, because I think that that'd be good. The like button is an addictive thing because we want, every time we get a like, a love, a laugh, or whatever, even an angry, like that stimulates us. And so we're like seeking likes. And so this one's really manipulative. This one has a lot of similarities to social situations in real life that we're going to go into right after this piece. But we basically are then start tailoring our behavior in ways that we think will get us more likes. And that's pretty fucked up. And then this challenging yet achievable tasks. These are all built into video games as well. And that's obviously why, because it keeps us playing. But they're all built into real life too, right? Challenging yet achievable. Like, can you get 100 people to sign on to the thing that says that we'll all kneel in the streets chanting while choking ourselves? That'd be great, guys. Do it. All right, so that's offering a stimulus. So where we've gone, we've got the hook, we filled in the backstory, we created unity, we fucked the counter argument people by calling them names usually, or other ways of painting any counter argument as ridiculous. We repeated the whole time, we've been repeating our goal, our appeal, whatever it is. We've used ethos, pathos, and logos the whole time, embedded in all of this to get people convinced that we're making really good arguments, even if we're not. We have tried to force people to imagine themselves or something that is very personal to them happening, so that we've literally, I mean, even on a magical level, if you're thinking of this, you've like literally garnered now their energy and put it into your vision by getting them to imagine it, right? And it's got them sunk into the narrative, right? They're like bought into it at that level. And so they're kind of sold, where it might be using colors, smells, and other sensory inputs in order to influence people as well, because we are human computers and certain inputs create certain outputs, and they know that. And we have offered rewards and stimuli that have made people feel like this is something they want to keep doing. Is like, oh, I got an oxytocin hit there. I really liked that. And that can come in all kinds of forms to get people continuing to do what you want them to do. One other thing, and this is part of the reward system as well, is you make it really, really easy for people to opt in. Really, really easy to opt in. All you have to do to opt in to my thing that I've been trying to convince you of this whole time is go to Subscribestar and subscribe at the $1 level. Who doesn't have $1? So easy to opt in, right? Or look, all you have to do to support Black Lives Matter, because you've already understood all the things we've said so far, and you know the fucking counter arguments against it are racist as fuck, and so all you have to do to support Black Lives Matter is just admit to white privilege. That's all you have to do. It's so easy. So then you just say, I have white privilege and I'm really bad, and now you support Black Lives Matter. How easy was that? It was so easy for you to opt in, right? And you get praise for it, and that stimulates your oxytocin, and now you're getting rewards for being bought into this, right? You have people suddenly who want to talk to you and are excited about your existence, and that feels amazing. Who wouldn't want to buy into this? Very easy, right? All you have to do is kneel right now in the street and say, me and my ancestors are pieces of shit, and I'm so sorry for you. Let me please chant that I can't breathe for an hour with my fist up in the air while kneeling in the same posture that supposedly killed a man, so that I can buy into your movement. It's so easy for me. All it costs me is an hour of my time, right? The easier you make it to buy in and to participate, the more likely people are going to go along with it. Even if it's somewhere inside themselves, they're like, I'm not really comfortable with kneeling, but man, it's way easier to do this than anything else, right? Just wear a mask. It's not that hard. You just put it on your face and you go about your day. Like, fucking just wear a mask, right? And then everyone wears a fucking mask. And they'll even say it. God, why don't you just wear a mask? It's so easy. You're like, yeah, but it's not good for me, and I don't fucking want to. So it doesn't matter how easy it is. But the easier it is, the more people will opt in. Especially when you make it really expensive to opt out. It's so easy to opt in, and look what the fuck happens when you opt out. Your relatives will stop talking to you. Your mother will make you hold a sign and shame the fuck out of yourself on public, social media and all kinds of shit. You will lose people if you don't opt into this movement. They have made it so expensive to opt out. Make it really easy to opt in. Make it exceptionally difficult to opt out. It is hard, you probably know, to stand up to somebody who you love, who you hug in real life, and to say to them, like, dude, I don't agree, and here's why. It's actually really important to me, knowing that the next thing that happens might be them saying, I'm never going to talk to you again. Like, okay, bye-bye. It's sad, but this is how they've done it. I mean, they're literally requesting people tell their family, I won't talk to you anymore unless you do blank. That's literally a form of abuse and bullying. It's fucking crazy, and people think it's great. They're like, well, that's easy for me to do. Especially if they, like, were already annoyed by anything about you, which is, like, life. If you're family and friends with people, like, you annoy each other sometimes. And now they can just cut you out because you didn't fucking kneel in the streets and lick people's boots or whatever the fuck we're doing this week. You didn't put on your fucking African slave driver, like, scarf, right? It wasn't good enough. You weren't good enough. What? Yeah, sorry. I was just trying to figure out what's happening in the chat. We got some fun times in there. And you know, another aspect of making it easier to buy in is tying it to something that everybody can agree with. Can everybody agree that Black Lives Matter? Almost ubiquitously, almost 100% of people, very few psychopaths think Black lives literally don't matter. Most people can be like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. That's really easy now. Do you support an entire movement that wants to rip down everything in the United States and build a communist utopia? You're like, wait, what? All I said was Black Lives Matter. But that's not actually what it is. But it's really effective to tie your movement to this thing that's like super easy to agree with. It's really easy to agree that gender equality is a good thing for everyone, right? How easy is, of course, it's good for everyone for gender equality to exist. But when you find out what some people think gender equality is, well, then now we get more complicated, right? But the best thing that you can get to get everyone to buy in as much as possible is to tie it to this very, very easy statement, right? This very easy statement like, well, you don't want the whole world to burn, do you? You're like, well, no, of course not. I don't want the whole world to burn. Like, good, then you support Greta Thunberg. You're like, what? No, I don't. But apparently I do, right? Well, you want fresh water, right? Well, then you support this tax on plastic water bottles. You're like, huh, that's interesting. All these things. You'll see it everywhere if you're looking for it. A really, really always a logical fallacy, but a very simple statement that everyone can get behind will be used to get people to agree with it. And of course, you have to tie it all up in the end with a really pretty bow, right? All of this can be yours for just 5 installments of $5 billion. And of course, all of your children in chains for the rest of eternity. But just pay attention to the easy part, right? Like, defunding the police is what we have to do, right? After all of these stories I've told you and all the rhetoric I've used, what we have to do is defund the police. We can't just reform it. We have to defund it. You're tying it back to all the things you've done, all the things you've been repeating, all the emotional appeals you've had, all of the very sensory data that you've put in at the right times to manipulate people, all of the we culture that you've created. You've brought it all together and you're tying it into now this very specific thing. We can't reform anything. We have to rip it all down, right? It's not good enough to reform. We have to rip it all down. And this is the tactic, right? You bring it to some sort of a conclusion and you tie it to a very simple call to action. Take action, join the movement, sign up for updates, give us $5, tell a friend, share it on social media. The calls to action are endless. They're almost all meaningless. But this is where you have to end, because at this point, if people are still with you, and most of them are, because most people are sheep that are easily led because they don't see all the things that we're all seeing here very clearly, And now they're tied into action. And once you do all of that mental gymnastics, you're like, oh, I got hooked in. I emotionally respond to this. I've imagined myself in this situation. I've agreed that I want to not burn the whole world down or whatever silly statements. And now I'm going to do this thing. And by the time you acted, like, you are invested. It is very hard at this point for you to back out ever, perhaps even for the rest of your life, and say, was this really about white supremacy, or was this about communism? Like, at that point, it's very difficult to question anything, because to question everything means you have to undo all the things that you already agreed to. You have to make yourself into a liar, right? Oh, maybe I didn't fucking care enough about my grandma, or what, I don't know. Whatever it is that you, like, convince yourself in your head, you'd have to undo all of that. It's so expensive to do that, right? So you got to end on the appeal to a call to action. It has to be clear and concise. If possible, it's emotional, right? If possible, you're still building in those elements of rhetoric that we went over at this level too. You're still repeating shit, all of that, but you end on the call to action. If you go right now and you look at any speech a politician has made, it will have almost every single one of these elements in it. If you look at any commercial, if you look at any movement as they take over your nation, any of these things, any of the paradigms we're supposed to adopt as a society en masse, they all are using these very, very simple, basic levels of tools. We can get a lot more in depth than this, of course. There is endless amounts of psychology. Again, that groupthink episode, that all ties into this. You can use all of those groupthink aspects of our psychology as well, and some of them were embedded in what we just did. All of the logical fallacies that we went through are going to be employed in a lot of the rhetoric you hear, in a lot of the advertising that you see. All of this stuff is layered in deep. And we can go back and we can look at the history of how our government has researched all of these things, and we can see it all in action. And we can look at the various historical figures like Edward Bernays and all of these things and how they're going about intentionally manipulating us over time. But at the very least, as an applicable level, these are the things you need to know in order to watch out for what they're doing to us all, and to be able to call it out, honestly. When you see someone, you can be like, oh, that's like their shitty call to action. It doesn't actually do anything. None of that stuff actually matters, but it's like, is getting you psychologically hooked into the movement. Or like, oh, that's a really illogical appeal to pathos. It doesn't actually make sense. Like, what's the actual point? What's the actual, like, root of the, like, what actually does make sense? It's not that, right? Calling it out and noticing it are two really important things that we can all do all the time. And you probably already do most of it because you're smart as fuck. But the 35 techniques politicians use to avoid answering interview questions is another thing I wanted to point out. It's not necessarily, I mean, it is rhetoric because people are going to use this in their fancy talk, right? Rhetoric is just fancy talk. But these are all the things that we see them doing when they are finally confronted with somebody who does still have logic intact and has made it through all the rhetoric unscathed. And they ask them a question. We see them ignore the question, acknowledge the question without answering it, questioning the question, attack the question, attack it. It doesn't do enough. It's not a good enough question. It contains something wrong. We see people doing this to us when we are interacting with them on social media, don't we? They attack the interviewer. That's ad hominem. That's illogical. They refuse to answer. They make a political point. Like, well, instead of answering that question, let me point out that we really need to do something about climate change, so you should give me more money. They provide an incomplete answer. They repeat the answer to the previous question. They just say something they already said again. They say or imply that the question has already been answered. They take the question literally when it's not meant to be literal. We see this all the time in media. They do all kinds of stuff. You know what's really interesting as well? So I mean, this is just one thing you can also think of. Once the rhetoric is kind of through, if there is any question and answer time, you can see how they're still weaseling their way out of sense and logic. But there's a very good essay by George Orwell. It's one of my favorite things ever written. And I highly suggest anybody who hasn't read it reads it. It's not only just well written because it's George Orwell and he's an amazing thinker, but it goes into all of the ways in which politicians manipulate language and say basically nothing and do it on purpose. It's really fascinating. He literally breaks it down into very specific, tactics that they use or whatever. And it's kind of long, but dude, it's so good. And he ends with some really easy rules, and you can actually see rhetoric at work in this essay too. So it's a good thing to end on, because it's a good to remember that all of the things we just went through are tools in and of themselves. That doesn't make them inherently bad or good. Just like any tool, they can be used for good. You can write really, really well, and you can present something really effectively and use all those rhetorical devices. And hopefully also you're doing it with logic intact, and you're not using logical fallacies. And then you're doing, good in the world. It's not bad to use our skills to be able to effectively communicate things with people. It's just bad when we're doing it in a manipulative, bullying way that is meant to create illusion and detach from truth and reality, right? Those are the things that we want to avoid. And that's what a lot of people are doing. And that's what we get caught up in with most of what's going on, with most politics, with most social shit, with everything that we see on TV, all politicians. I've maybe Rand Paul or something. Like, there might be some like good, honest ones that aren't trying to like fuck with our minds and manipulate us. But most of the shit we see is this manipulative bullying, rhetoric in the misuse of rhetoric, I should say. And George Orwell would hate it. But again, if you want to use it appropriately and you want to present truth and goodness, it's not bad to start with a hook, right? It's not bad to get people to imagine something and place themselves into it emotionally, especially if it's something that they've never considered, right? Like, imagine a world in which history doesn't exist and no one knows what happened in the past. Maybe you want to think about that before you rip everything down, right? Like, things like, it's not negative. You can use these things in a productive way. So I like to remind people of that, because it is important to remember, right? If you see people using these methods, it doesn't make them evil. It's just, you want to be aware that like, this might be manipulative, and I might want to, be a little bit more like cautious about what I'm taking in and how I'm responding to it. So keep it in mind. Yes, Chris, it's sad that you even have to clarify. Chris says BLM is bullshit, Antifa is a terrorist group. And then he says, of course, when I say BLM is bullshit, I don't mean Black Lives Don't Matter. I mean the organization BLM is bullshit. And it's sad. I actually, it was sad to me the other day. Someone I know and love, and I were talking about Black Lives Matter, and I had no idea that they were just talking about the phrase, and I was talking about the organization. So I'm like criticizing Black Lives Matter as an organization, which you should be able to do. It's a pretty shady ass organization. It's gotten an exorbitant amounts of money from all kinds of corporations and George Soros and the Open Society Foundation and all of these fucked up shit. So yeah, you should like ask like, whoa, where's all that money going, and what do these people actually want? Like, so that's what I'm doing, and people are like, you racist. And I'm like, how is it racist to wonder what this organization that has way too much like power in our society right now is doing? Like, why is it bad to question their motivations or whatever? But the people I was talking to literally didn't even understand that there was an organization, and that blew my fucking mind. I was like, people don't even know. They literally are just stuck on the phrase. And it's like we said, that's why it's a really good rhetorical device to just make a claim that everyone can agree with. Everyone can agree Black Lives Matter. And now you've completely hidden behind that claim that everyone can agree with all of this nefarious shit. And it works so well. It's stunning. Like, I had no idea that people didn't understand the difference between the two. So yeah, it sucks that you even have to say, yes, Black Lives Matter. And also Black Lives Matter as an organization is fucking insane. It's a crazy, horrible organization full of all kinds of bullshit. So that was shocking for me. And I agree with you, Chris. And Antifa may have at one point been kind of cool, but they definitely act like terrorists and fit the definition of terrorists now. So it's interesting if people support them. I wonder why. Oh, Burning Marl, the links don't come through for you guys. only for me, but let me try to find the link you're trying to share. Audio of George Orwell's Politics and the English Language. I should have put the link in anyway. Well, this is not the audio, but I'll throw in the link to the text if anybody wants to read it. It's an awesome... And you probably could find it on archive.org if you're looking for the audio. And I'll put the link to the text version in archive.org in case anybody wants to go into archive.org and poke around for the audio. Sorry that you guys can't share links. I don't think that's anything I can control. I've kind of poked around looking for something that might let me allow you to use links, but I haven't found anything. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just missing it. That's always possible. But yeah, that'd be a great thing to listen to if you don't like to read long essays, but want to hear what he has to say. It's a good one, and it fits along with what we've been talking about. So like I said, all of these elements of rhetoric that we've gone over are also elements of good narratives. So people who are telling stories use these devices as well. And you'll see it in any story you look at. There's always a hook. There's always like action right at the beginning or something happening right away that you're like, oh shit, what's this? And you pay attention. They always then fill in the backstory. They always get you emotionally invested. They always get you to imagine like what if this was you, and it's emotional and it's whatever. And there's some sort of ethos, pathos, and logos involved in it. And there's all of these sensory things that they try to embed in there to get you really immersed in the experience. We teach these things in story writing. We teach them in rhetoric. We teach them in speech writing. We teach them in logic and persuasion, when we're doing units of that in English class. And you've probably learned many of them in those. And there's even more, right? There's like a list of something like 150 rhetorical devices. And they're also narrative devices. And they're also just literary devices. And they're just things that you can use to like snazz up your, language use and your writing skills or whatever. But when it comes down to it, the ones that we just went over are the ones that are the most psychologically impactful, and they're the most basic level that you're going to see in the most types of media. But you think about like, why do we use these things to write a story or create a story? And it's because stories are what humans relate to. Like Michael Wan said it really well the other night when he was just on Sunday. Cool episode. If you haven't heard it, go check it out. He said, humans are stories. And it's like, yeah, yes, we are, right? We tell ourselves the story of ourselves. We tell other people the story of ourselves. We want the story of themselves from other people. We love reading stories, hearing stories, watching stories. Like the world is narrative. And so, when we're talking about persuasion and rhetoric, it's really impossible to divorce it from narrative because all of those things are embedded within it. Where really what they're doing at the core is telling you a story. Right? They're weaving a tale to get you to come along down the stream with them. Right? And so they can't do that without all of these devices. They can't get your buy-in as well if they don't present it as a story, as a narrative. And it's cool. We use that language now. We're like, what's the narrative that they're selling? Right? Like, what's the narrative they're piecing together? What's their story? Because once we see the story, it's easier to remember, like, that's fiction. And it's not true. That's fiction, and I can disengage from it. Sasha says they want their illusion to be real. They want you to identify with their characters, and they want you to fear their boogeyman. Exactly. Yes. If you are putting yourself as a character in that narrative and you have those demons coming after you and you have your heroes ready to come in and save you and you're going to be a hero along with the heroes, like, oh my God, it's so engaging. It's so alluring. It's very effective. So yeah. They give us, we lend our imaginations to the story that they weave. They give us motivation to keep doing so. They give us addictive, behaviors. They punish us when we step outside of it. It makes it expensive for us to go away from the narrative or disengage from it. And they give us very clear instructions of very simple things to do in order to support the movement. They tell us that that's invaluable, and without us, they could never accomplish anything. And everything that they do builds on these principles. If they didn't do this, they wouldn't have us ensnared, and we wouldn't go along with it. If you were just so busy, like, creating your wonderland on your property and, like, hanging out with your friends, and you weren't even paying attention to any of this shit, you might not even know there's a fucking virus or, like riots, you know, because it's not in your fucking backyard probably. So they have to get us all wrapped up in these narratives to make them work, right? They're really fucking good at it. But yeah, so I just want you guys to remember to be free yourselves, right? By being aware and present and watching for these things, you are freeing yourself from their effects. And you've probably already done it if you're listening to the show at all. But it's never bad to really get like specific about the actual tactics, so that you can identify them. And like I said, point them out to others when you can, and destroy them as they come at you by seeing them for what they are. Thunder Chicken, what's up? The audio is very low for you. I don't think it is for other people. I hope not, because no one has said so this whole time. So that would be sad. And it's nearly like topping out on my side. So I don't know. Let me try something actually. I want to see what happens. And hopefully I'm not going to destroy everything as I do this. What about now? What about now? Now is it like too loud? So other people didn't have any problems, but now is it too loud, or is it a better level of audibility? Audibility is a word now. Do Greta again. What's up, Lee Martin? You have ruined my audio. And no one can hear me. That's my Greta. It's loud, but not too loud. Good. Okay, maybe we'll keep it there. Thanks for suggesting such, Thunder Chicken. My chickens, by the way, are outdoors permanently. Obviously, they're like living in their coop at night, and they come out in the day, and they get to have a bunch of room to run around and eat green things and bugs. And also we give them like cherries and berries. We spoil the fuck out of them. They are the happiest chickens. They're doing great. I haven't not taken many pictures of them lately, so I'm sorry that you guys haven't been able to regale yourself with stories of my chickens and, you know, pictures of them being hella cute, but they're doing very good. And the garden is growing food. I have beans now I can pull off of a bush and eat them if I want, and more food is coming, so I'm very excited for the things coming down the pike. If it's too loud, you're too old. Good point. So yeah, it's awesome to see you guys all here tonight. I hope that this presentation of rhetoric and narrative has, at the very least, reinforced the things you already knew, and at best enlightened you to some of the shit that they use to control you and your friends. And you can not only free yourself from these things by seeing them as for what they are and knowing them and calling them out to other people, but you can free them too if they are willing to listen. And remember the repetition part. You repeat it enough, they might actually start to be curious and hear you. Who knows? So I promise to bring you more pictures of chickens somewhere in the future. But in the meantime, I hope that you remain free. I hope that you remain open-minded. I hope that you remain curious. I hope that you keep thinking always and sharing your thoughts with other people. I hope you keep being aware of the basic tactics of control that are used against you in our society. And maybe you come back to this episode every time they roll out like a new social control paradigm for us, like they've done, 3 times this year already? And they're all tied together, sort of, and we'll just see what comes next. Maybe we come back, right? Maybe every time you hear a speech and you want to tear it apart, you come back to these things. I don't know. But just keep in mind, it literally is everywhere around you. These narratives are being woven constantly, trying to entrap you. And even from people you know and love who aren't even aware they're doing it, they're using these tactics too. So you can apply this on a personal level too. If people are bullying you and manipulating you, that's not in your best interest. And you may want to start looking at that and be like, they're doing this thing, you know? And again, it's not always bad. Just because people do some of these things doesn't make it bad, but the more you recognize it and see it, the more you can determine if it's being used in a factual, logical, way that makes sense and supports your well-being and your best, highest vision of yourself, or if it's being used in a way that's bullying and dismissive and destroys logic and hides things and manipulates. And then you want to destroy it and get away from it. So until you see everything in perfect vision, share that vision with other people that gives them clarity as well, and free yourself and everyone from the chains of rhetorical, narrative, persuasive manipulation. Travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Nasty motherfuckers with a hook and a sickle. Brought to you advertisement, bone-plated nickel. Fire rate automatic smash from the get-go. Snack on the whack, fermented flesh disco. Abracadabra, archaic altars don't slabber. Hey, making jabbers with reality backwards. Hunting rap nerds, bodyguard collected actors. Munitions are famished, let them feast upon the dapper. Bloody bibs and muddy kicks, feasting on amygdalas. Iron fist, tyrant shit, APO will rip you up. The rhyme rainmaker, Bane style backbreaker. Genghis-Khan depleted uranium satellite lasers. Cloaked in anonymity, I know you never heard of me. No rusted tools used for Crowley style surgery.
Dissect a whole set, God body. God taught me to dissect the whole body. When it gets sloppy, I'ma get there. Rhymes rare like steak, get crushed like crates to create 52 states. And it's Baghdad, dusted towels, no rags. Straight melt dash, dust to ash. Turbans while the niggas perkin'. It's on purpose, my service touches the sun's surface. And rainbows touch serpents. My light all night shines so bright. I'm a star for eons, Hollywood's for peons. Cause they try to copy the same shit we on. Hey, I ain't done yet. Lungs depleted and can't breathe, can't believe it. Trying to seek it while trying to peep it. It's a secret. Now you're nobody. Label somebody. Trying to claim John Gotti. It's yours truly, God body.